So you get to my age and your mom still follows you around. So I am honored to be here. And for those of you who are educators, well, first of all, before I get started, I want to make sure I know who I'm talking to. If you're an educator, K through 12, would you just raise your hand, please? If you're a teacher, it doesn't matter what your role is. If you're higher ed, who's all higher ed? Mostly higher ed. If you're a student right now in the College of Education, any of you guys? All right. And then the rest of you guys, you won't know any of the abbreviations I'm going to use. You won't understand half the words I use. But I'm going to start by explaining what I'm not going to do first, and then I'll tell you what I am going to do. So I'm not going to give you a whole bunch of data and statistics and a whole bunch of things that most of you may already know. What I'm going to do is I'm going to try to talk to you as it relates to public ed in a way that hopefully causes you to think a little bit about what your role is. I'm going to talk about things the way I view the world. I'm going to talk about A-Leaf just for a second. Not that this area has anything in common with A-Leaf. We're a large, big district, very diversified, very urban. But it does have to do with this notion of what is our responsibility in the institution of education, in public education. So whether you're teaching at a school with 100 kids or whether you're in one of my schools with 4,000 kids, it doesn't matter. We all have the same responsibilities. So I'm going to kind of shift back and forth from the way I see public ed right now, the way or the direction I see it going, and then some of the observations I'm going to make, and then some challenges I'm going to issue to you and to those of us that are in the profession, and particularly those of you who are choosing this as your profession choice at this point in your life. So I don't like to use PowerPoint. I hate death by PowerPoint, right? But I'm going to use it anyway because it keeps me in the right direction. So just a couple of quotes, and I'm not going to expect you to read the second one, but the first one set the tone. Thomas Jefferson said this many years ago. If a nation expects to be ignorant and free in a state of civilization, it expects not what ever was and what never will be. And if you go back, and I'm a history major, so if you go back and you read the Jeffersonian papers where Thomas Jefferson and Ben Franklin wrote about the creations of the public education system, they talk about two things. They talk about the system being a system that is going to develop a way to distinguish between the doers and the thinkers. And they use those two words. So if you think about this, the system was designed to call out and to determine who can think, and whoever thinks is going to go to college. And if you can't think, then you're going to be a doer. And what are you going to go do? You're going to go work. The system of public education that we have right now is very similar in that regard. The difference is we don't expect to call out different, the doers and the thinkers. We ask our public education system to do a whole lot more. So as I get into this conversation, I want you to be thinking about Jefferson's original thought that if you're going to sustain yourself as a society and you don't think you can do it by educating everyone, then you're asking for something that never has been and never will be. And for that's kind of the groundwork for this. So who is A-Leaf? And to the right is who Texas is. So if you don't realize this is public ed, pre-K through 12th grade. So 4-year-olds through the 12th grade. Understanding that pre-K is not required, kindergarten is not required, but everyone offers it now. We have roughly 47,000 students. The state of Texas has 5.3 million school-age kids as we sit today. As we get ready to open for 2018-19, we will expect around 5.5 million kids to be in schools across the state of Texas in pre-K through 12th grade. That growth between 5.3 million and 5.5 million, that roughly 150 to 200,000 kids, 80% of those kids are going to be coming from homes that do not speak English, and 75% of them are going to be coming from homes that are qualified as economically disadvantaged. So we are not, as a state, the population that I'm getting ready to talk about is growing, and it is going to grow exponentially over the next 5 years. 88% of my kids are economically disadvantaged, 60% across the state of Texas. 43% of my kids come from houses that do not speak the English language. And I wish they all spoke Spanish. I wish they all were, but I've got 95 different languages spoken in my district. I could take you to an elementary school right now, or tomorrow morning right now, they better not be there right now, but I could take you to one tomorrow morning where there's about 400 kids who were in a Burmese refugee camp 3 months ago in France who have just been shipped over to the United States, and they have been placed in A-Leaf. And these kids are kids from 4 to 16 years old. The 4, 5, 6, 7-year-olds have never, ever sat in a chair with a group of kids around them. They've never held a pencil. They're spitting on the floor. They're urinating in the corner. That's what they know. So that population is growing. So kind of keep that number. 19% of the kids in the state of Texas do not come from a home that speaks the English language. 53 are Hispanic. 52% of the state are Hispanic. 30% of my district are African American. 12.6 across the state. 15% Asian. 4.3 across the state. In A-Leaf, my kids do not look like me. Or I don't look like my kids, however you want to look at it. But here's what I do know, and I've learned this. I do know that it doesn't matter what color your skin is, moms and dads basically want the same things for their kids. So whether they just came across the border and can't speak a word of English, whether they live in a rat-infested apartment, whether they live in their car, they all want the best for their children. I can unequivocally say that. And what the parents tell me is they don't care what color my skin is. Help my child have a better life than I have. And if you walk into an environment, and it doesn't matter, being a 53-year-old white guy, it doesn't matter. All I'm telling the black parents, the Hispanic parents, the Asian parents is I care about your kids, and I'm going to do everything I can possibly do to make sure that they change the cycle that you're in right now. Every one of us, you guys, every one of us in the profession, that is our responsibility. If you don't take that responsibility seriously, you do not need to be in this profession. And you do not need to be working in it, especially in the state of Texas as we move forward. The last thing is 23% continuous enrollment, and I'm going to talk about that later. This is not an educational term that's in any PEMS. You know what PEMS is? There's not any official data, but I'm going to talk about it because I think it's one of the issues in which the state of public education in Texas should feel proud. So kind of bear with me as we go through this. So I'm going to talk about the way I see education now in Texas. In a nutshell, public ed is not much different than it was 100 years ago. Think about your high school class. Yeah, you older people. Think about the class that you were in high school taking English or government or whatever math course you took. It was typically a classroom with desks and a teacher's desk, and back then chalkboards. Now we got all kinds of technology. But you were in a class. We have the same thing. That has not changed that much. Scheduling has not changed. We still go to school in August. We get out at the end of May, first part of June. We have summer school. Nothing has changed. Now, we're doing a lot of different things. But you have to remember what I said earlier. What was the system designed to do from its inception? It was initially designed to separate. And the way it separated was using two variables. Think about time and performance. Every one of you, when you were in the first grade, you went into first grade, you did your 8 or 9 months, and hopefully you did enough to pass to the second grade, right? But you always knew there was that kid that didn't make it, right? Or that kid who was so smart, I'm using girls because they were always the smartest, but she was ready to go to the second or third grade. But the time was constant. We weren't going to let you move ahead, and if you didn't make it, we were going to keep you back because something must be wrong with you because you didn't learn as fast as everyone else did. Those two issues, time and performance, those two issues, in my opinion, are what's holding us back in terms of moving to a more individual, student-centered education. We can call what we do now student-centered, but it ain't. It's not. And so I'm going to talk about, in terms of the system that we have right now, I would argue that it is not much different than it's been, I guarantee, since I was in high school, and probably most of you guys that were in high school prior to me. Our kids are changing, and I don't mean the language barrier, and I don't mean the economic status. I'm talking about the kids are changing in terms of what they expect out of us. We have the most educated students coming to us in the history of mankind. We have 5-year-olds coming to kindergarten that know, in many cases, more than we knew when we were graduating high school in terms of how to access information. They may have not known how to multiply. They may have not known Algebra 2, but they sure know how to access information to get an answer. And so while the demographics of what our kids look like are changing, and that's no secret, what's really changing and what is more significant is what they know, and then what do we do with what they know when they get to us. And many of you, in most cases, a lot of us, when they get to us, we almost power them down literally. And if you're a kid in here, you know exactly what I'm talking about. We told you to put your cell phone up. If we caught you with it, we're going to take it from you, make you pay you $15 before you get it back, right? Yeah, it's stupid. So anyway, so we're not dealing with just a changing demographic. We're changing with a different intellect. And I'm going to tell you, in A-Leaf, 95% of my kindergartners are poor. But I will promise you, when they come into a kindergarten classroom, they know how to do research. They have a phone, or they have access to one, and they know how to get information. I think as an educational community, we have got, that's an area in which we are slowly recognizing. Our teacher population is changing. This generation right here, those that are a little bit older, the millennials, they're coming into the profession differently, with different skill sets and different expectations. Let me tell you what the hardest thing to do. Any principals in here? Any high school principals? High school principal? How hard is it to find someone to sponsor the cheerleaders right now if they're under the age of 25? They won't do it. They won't do it. One, it's not enough money. Two, is the stress it puts you under. And three, it takes up what they consider to be valuable time. So we've got they're going to teach, and they're going to work when they're there. But in terms of what their expectations are for their job and what they're going to do is changing. So we are having to address that from a purely human resources perspective and a professional development. We are revamping our entire professional development in many cases around this changing expectation of teachers who are coming into the profession. And guess who it drives crazy? Those with 15, 20, 25, 30 years of experience. I've got them threatening me, writing me dirty emails, literally retiring, because the change that is happening with their profession with those that are younger than them are so different, and they're so much challenging that there's a gap that's in some cases they can't overcome. My daughter's 26. She's in her 5th year of teaching 5th grade math and science in the Katy School District. She was asked this past summer by her principal to be the team leader for 5th grade math and science. She is the youngest teacher other than her is 21 years older than her. But those teachers asked the principal to ask Rachel to be the team leader because they recognize what's going on, and she views teaching totally different than they do. So just the changing population of skills. And the last one on this was the changing leadership population. I'm going to blame Lamar for this. We have so many candidates for leadership roles, assistant principals, central office positions, because there are so many more people earning their postgraduate, post-baccalaureate degrees. And a lot of them are coming from Lamar. A great majority of them are coming from Lamar, and I celebrate that. But what is changing is we are now, and those of us who are making decisions as to who goes into these roles, we are now having to flesh through not only what did you do in the classroom, but more so what are you bringing to the table in terms of your work ethic? How can you work with the populations I just mentioned, both the adults and the kids? And so we've had to change the way and we're doing this as we speak, we're changing the way we identify leaders in our district. I've got hundreds and hundreds of principals and hundreds of assistant principals and all that, and it's difficult. But on any given job fair for an administrative job in A-Leaf, we'll have over 1,000 to 1,200 people, qualified, certificate, paper-holding candidates that we've got to figure out who's the best fit. That's different. I remember 20 years ago, it was not like that. So those are just a few things. Now, I'm going to move quickly through this. Standardization, and I don't mean standardized test. Our system is standardized. If you don't fit into the standard, chances are you're going to almost remove yourself from education. I'll talk about how I think we should address this in a little bit. We are slowly adjusting to market demands. And the market I am talking about is the market, the moms and the dads, the adults who control where children go to school, where their children go to school. Uh, we are in the epicenter in Houston of charter schools. Anybody from a charter school? We are in the epicenter of it. We are now looking at how do we recruit, how do we retain, how do we sustain student enrollment, just like universities have been doing for the last 1,000 years on recruiting and maintaining student population. We're now having to compete. I mean, I've got an entire department that have never taught a day in their life, but they're marketing and branding experts. So they can take all the great things that are going on in our school system and market them and brand them. Because there's not a mom and dad on the planet Earth that doesn't want their child to go to the coolest school who has the name like, XYZ School of Academic Achievement and Harmony and Lifelong Happiness and Fulfillment. God, I want to go to that school. But in all seriousness, as people are looking at these flashy names. So what we're having to do is we're having to very intentionally say, well, we've been doing this great for the last 50 years. Well, now we got to go tell people. And going back to Kenneth's, he's dead on. We have done a terrible job of the royal we, a terrible job of marketing what we do and the service we provide, not only for your community and your kids, but for our republic as we know it. So the market that I'm referring to is we're beginning to recognize we've got to sell ourselves. In every district, every school in Region 5, Region 4, across the state has a story to tell. And there's a lot of really positive, powerful things, meaningful things going on, but it cannot be a secret and only talked about like a Dead Poet Society conversation inside the four walls of your building, whether you're at the school level or at the campus level. Teachers, you are the most critical component of this. People typically don't believe me. If I stand in front of a group of people, I'm a notch below a politician and a notch above a lawyer. With all due respect to the lawyers. But in all honesty, if I stand up and I talk about A-Leaf and I talk about all the good things that are going on, your typical reaction is, well, he's supposed to say those things. But the people who make the difference are teachers, custodians, bus drivers, food service workers, the people that are in the community. They typically live in your community. They typically have lived there forever. And when they say something is going on at the elementary school, they have your ear. You believe them. People believe them. So we've got, in my district, I've got over 5,000 teachers. I've got 5,000 ambassadors, potential ambassadors. It will take one to screw up and to talk negatively about our district, and it will take us months and months and months, if not years and years, to recover from whatever they said. You have that much power. And I can give you example after example after example, and those of you who have been in the business, you know exactly what I'm talking about. So that's what I mean by marketing. We're graduating more kids than ever, honest to God. Never in the history of Texas, never in the history of the United States have there been more children, more students graduating from high school. So we got that going for us. We are experiencing student growth in Texas. I don't know if you realize this, but our state grows by students by about 80,000 kids a year. 160,000 kids every biennium. That's actually, every year we grow by the size of Dallas ISD. So every 2 years. Every 2 years we grow by the size of Dallas ISD. And those are the kids I just described to you earlier. Anyone ever heard of Jamie Vollmer? Jamie Vollmer wrote a book called Schools Cannot Do It Alone. I would encourage every one of you to either find that book, go online, you can get it for $5 on Amazon. Schools Cannot Do It Alone. Jamie Vollmer was worldwide famous because he owned an ice cream shop in a little small town in Iowa that won the best ice cream award like 6 years in a row. It's blueberry ice cream. Jamie, since he could make ice cream, whenever the governor of Iowa decided to put together a blue ribbon team of education experts, I guess he felt Jamie could make ice cream, so he must know something about education. But Jamie was very critical of public ed, very critical, very critical. Jamie takes off and gets involved in this task force to look at education in Iowa, and about 3 years later, he had completely turned and flipped his opinion based on what he saw once he got into the classroom, once he got into schools. He wrote a book and he talks about what the expectations are that our society has on public ed. So if you go back to the late 1700s, all they were wanting to do was teach kids math, reading, not so much writing, and religion. That's what they wanted. They wanted to make sure that their Christianity faith was continued to be taught. If you go back to the Puritans and in that time frame, you fast forward 200 years and think about what we're responsible for now. I could literally write 200 additional responsibilities that have been placed on public schools, from feeding them to transporting them to, and you name it. We've got every Heritage Day name you can think of. If we miss one, we get in trouble. We've got every issue you can imagine. We've got bullying. We've got, if there's a social issue to be addressed, where do you go to address it? You go to schools. Why do you go to schools? Because that's where the kids are. That's where the social is. You know, so it's a. I don't know how we sustain this, and the expectations that are placed on our schools. I'm not sure as a society how we sustain it, but I do believe it needs to be recognized. What are some things we're doing right? I'll tell you what we're doing right that we weren't doing when I started 31 years ago. We're teaching and we're being held accountable for every kid. I can remember being in the classroom 31 years ago, and we were not responsible. We were not held accountable for every kid. If we did not, and I'm saying we, I don't know that I ever consciously did it, but the system allowed for it to happen. But if you want to fuss about accountability and assessment, that's fine. I'll join in there with you. But one thing accountability in Texas has done that I would never, ever want to take away is it has held us accountable for every kid. It doesn't allow us to ignore. It doesn't allow us just to put our best and brightest up here and let everybody think we're doing a great job while we got some kids in the back of the house who are struggling. And that's what was going on 30, 40, 50, 60 years ago. We're beginning to treat kids as individual learners, not assembly line products. If you're in the business, you know what an individual education plan is, right? For our special ed kids. That means we've got a special plan specifically for HD based on his behavior, his learning, what he does well, what he does wrong. And then the rest of the roughly 90% of the student population, we just kind of lump them all together and hope it works out at the end of their 12 or 13 years. We're beginning to spend more time where we're treating kids individually and trying to do the best we can, even within the classroom. Differentiated learning, you heard that right? All these terms that have been recycled over and over and over. But it's trying to get to the point where if the kid's sitting in the back of the room and she's not responding to the way I teach, then I need to go find out and figure out what's going to get her attention. That's hard work. If you're in the class, that's hard work. It's almost impossible, depending on the situation. But that is a growing trend, and I think it's going to be necessary for that student population we're dealing with. We are reacting to market demands, choice. I don't necessarily mean choice in charters or private schools, but you have more and more school districts who are offering their own choice. In my district, of the 50,000 kids or so that I've got, about 35% of them are going to a school that they applied to go to within A-Leaf. And so there's choice. So whenever you get into discussions or you have discussions about choice, don't let your mind take you straight to, well, I'm competing against a charter, I'm competing against an outside entity. Take your mind to, well, how can we offer opportunities within our school district, within your own system, and then talk about it so that moms and dads understand that they do have choice within your district. And we spend, like I said earlier, we spend a lot of money on publications and PR and branding, and I can still walk up to parents right now and say, well, did you know we did this, this, and this? And they go, I had no idea. I said, well, throw your hands up. That's what we're beginning to do, is to react to the market demands. We're reacting to economic demands, and I'm going to talk about this in just a little bit. For those of you at the high school area, we're beginning to have a more focused attention on educating kids, at least within an area in which will lead to some meaningful post-secondary credential. Whether it's being prepared to go to college without remediation courses, whether it's going into the workforce with a meaningful credential or certification, or whether it's going into the military and be able to pass both your ASVAB and your physical fitness exam. Those are the things where we're beginning to react. Many of you are familiar with the piece of legislation that was passed back in 2013, House Bill 5. The thing it did, the thing that House Bill 5 tried to address was it tried to address in my opinion, the legitimacy, trying to legitimize other forms of opportunities for kids in our economy that, for the most part, was not being legitimized. It's almost as if you weren't going to get a 4-year degree in some engineering field, or you weren't going to become a lawyer, doctor, or some professional 4 or 6 doctoral degree. If you weren't going to do that, then you were almost labeled a failure. While we didn't look at a kid and say you're a failure, we almost ignored them as if they were failures. That's beginning to change. That is beginning to change. And then last but not least, on the right, holding students and educators and communities accountable. Here's what we're doing wrong, in my opinion. We're relying on snapshots in time to make value judgments. Whether it's a standardized test, whether it's whatever the issue is, we're relying on a snapshot in time to make a decision as to how smart some kid is, or how unprepared some kid is, or how good a teacher is, or how good a principal is or isn't. And those are some pretty high stakes decisions. And if you're not in the profession, if you don't pay attention to this stuff every day, then you would have no idea. But if you're in the profession, I'm concerned. I'm really concerned about how we define who's doing well and who's not doing well. And we're working really hard at the state level to redefine that through the accountability system. But that is something we're doing wrong. What else are we doing wrong? We're labeling education on these less than reliable, valid indicators. You and I both know that sitting for a test in the middle of April tells me very little. It tells me very little about how hard you work. It tells me very little about how you can work as a group, how you can work as a team. One of the things we do in A-Leaf, and I think most districts do this, but this is if you walked up to a teacher tomorrow morning and you said, what are the 3 key components of education in A-Leaf? It's going to be, you got to be able to problem solve, you got to be able to work as a group, and you got to be able to communicate. If you go to any employer on planet Earth, doesn't matter what they do, those are the 3 essential skills they want. I spent a lot of time with Google and Mountain View and with their leadership group, and they don't care what degrees you have. They don't care what your GPA was. They don't care if you're the high school prom. They don't care if you're the prom queen. They don't care if you're homecoming queen. It doesn't matter. They want to know, can you solve a problem? Can you collaborate with other people? Can you work with other people? And can you communicate the problem you just solved? We have got to make that the cornerstone of every single day in our schools. And it can be done. It can be done in a grand scale. It can be done in small scales. But we have to be able to talk about that. Ignoring the most important stage of brain development, pre-K, early childhood. The state of Texas has not committed to this. I can give you data point after data point after data point, but if we only would take serious how important it is to have a child reading on grade level by 3rd grade, and then look at the exponential benefits of that as they go into 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th, 9th, 10th, it is phenomenal. And many of you are familiar with the data. The state of Texas has not committed to that. In 2000, I'll pick on him because I talk to him quite often. The governor ran on a platform that he was the pre-K, the education governor. And if you elect me, I'm going to fund pre-K, and we're going to get this right. He does it in 2015. There was a piece of legislation that was passed. We helped him get it passed. It funded some growth towards full-day pre-K, and in 2017, he was nowhere to be found on it. Nowhere. And when the special session was called this past summer, and he gave us top 20 items he wanted addressed, top 20, the pre-K didn't even make the top 20. And I literally called him and said, what the hell? It doesn't even make your top 20? As a state, if we screw this one up around the 3, 4, 5, 6-year-olds, then all this other stuff I'm talking about, it's going to be really hard, if not impossible. We have to get early childhood correct. I don't necessarily want to take a kid the day after they're born, after their mom kisses them on the forehead, and they get them named, and, good luck. We're going to take them with. I mean, I exaggerate, but there are some cases where I wish I could. Because we got kids coming to us in kindergarten that aren't ready. We got kids coming to us in pre-K that aren't even close to being ready. And as a state, with that demographic I keep talking about, it's changing. If we don't get these children at that age, we are going to pay a price for it. We are going to pay a price. Our economy is going to pay a price. Our tax base is going to pay a price. Well, I'm already seeing it in the greater Houston area. And so there's this fundamental argument. And it's a good argument. It's a philosophical argument. At what point does the state hold the parents responsible? Surely they should be held responsible for at least till they're 3 years old, right? 4 years old. I am in that camp. I think it's utterly irresponsible for a parent or for a family to not have their child ready to go to school in kindergarten or pre-K. But just because I want it and just because I think it's irresponsible doesn't mean it's happening. And knowing what I know right now with the stakes being so high, with kids not being literate in numeracy and literacy by the time they're in the third grade, and what the impact that is on graduation rates, what the impact that is on our economy, what the impact that is, it's going to be on my kids, my grandkids, their kids. I can't just sit by and wish what I had was happening, knowing full well it's not happening. And I think as an educational community, this is mission critical number one. I'm always asked, if you got an extra $1 million in A-Leaf, what are you going to spend it on? I'm going to put it in early childhood and pre-K. If I get an extra $2 million, I'm putting it in early childhood and pre-K. And we're going to keep plugging away at that. Okay. We're failing to recruit, develop, and retain enough quality educators. So tell you something you didn't know, right? So put it in perspective. In the state of Texas, for the 2018-19 school year, this ought to go well with you guys because you'll have your choice of where you want to work. We will need 365,000 teachers in the state of Texas, pre-K through high school. We anticipate from this year roughly 301,000 returning, which leaves us a void of, and then because of growth, about 6,300 new jobs that don't exist right now. That means we're going to have almost 71,000 openings across the state of Texas in pre-K through 12. The total number of candidates coming out of traditional programs that we anticipate is a little less than 12,000. The total number of adults coming out of ACP programs is around 15,600, with a total of 27,000. So as I've said, I've told people all the time, I ain't a math major, but I can add, subtract. Going into the 18-19 school year, we're looking at roughly a 43,000 total teacher shortage across the state. And guess the top 3 areas in which the shortage is most critical. Bilingual, elementary. I can't find bilingual elementaries, and I pay a lot of money. We start at $54,000 a year, and I pay $6,000 if you have your bilingual ESL certification. You can come out of college making $60,000 in A-Leaf ISD, and you haven't taught the first day. We travel to Puerto Rico, we travel to Spain, we travel to, you name it, South America, we travel all over the world. Our HR's travel budget is off the charts high, specifically looking for bilingual elementary teachers. We've got to figure that one out, folks. We've got to figure that one out. The second most popular, the second most needy is high school math. We need people who can teach Algebra 1, Geometry, Algebra 2, Pre-Cal, and Statistics. It used to be science, but we now have plenty of science. We have a lot of folks that came over out of the engineering field that are teaching science now when the economy went south, when the price of a barrel of oil went down. And the third is foreign language, the high school. And I'm not going to get into that. I think foreign language in high school is totally screwed up. Why we teach foreign language in high school, I have no idea. It needs to be taught early on, but that's a lesson for another day. So if I'm king for the day, that's what I'm going to do after I figure out pre-K. My point is the shortage, this is the single most critical factor facing public ed right now, period. As I mentioned, pre-K is the issue, but if I don't have people in the classroom to teach the 4-year-olds, it doesn't matter. This is a train wreck that many people say are coming. I would argue it's already here. I've got roughly 5,000 teachers in my district. I've got about 75 unfilled positions right now. I got about 75 people that are in classrooms that are not certified. They're long-term subs. They're just there to try to keep the peace, keep things going so things don't get out of hand. Sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. But that is an issue that we are all going to have to resolve and address at some point. What should we be doing? This is very philosophical. Our state does not view education as an investment. It's a line item in the budget. They proved it in 2011. I never thought I'd see the day where that was the case, but nothing is sacred. If there's not enough money in the budget, the first thing you're going to whack is public ed. You know why? Because 2/3 of the Texas budget goes to K-12 and higher ed. And heck, K-12 gets hammered every year worse than K-12 does, higher ed does. So of the $55 to $60 billion every 2 years that's spent on public ed, it can go away. Just like when I showed up in A-Leaf back in 2011, literally I was hired, and about 2 days later I inherited about a $30 million shortfall because of the cuts that took place in 2010-11. Every district across the state of Texas was dealing with that. Funding, for early, as I mentioned, early childhood, quality pre-K. I think there needs to be an incentive and a mandate that we align ourselves more with higher ed. The only alignment that's going on in higher ed right now are because individuals who want to do it. You got a staff here, you got leadership in this institution that wants to do it. You got Alief ISD, I can tell you, I know their superintendent, he wants to do it. And we have to continually work. We have to continually work at aligning, because for so long, there was this kingdom of higher ed, this kingdom of K-12, and the kingdom of the workforce, and God forbid we ever talked. And K-12 would blame us for preparing a very ill-prepared student. The workforce would blame us for not preparing a prepared member of the workforce, and we'd blame higher ed for never changing, and you're using the same syllabi you used in 1976, which is true, by the way, in some cases, right? Have you seen it where the paper's yellow, right? It's all like leaving a newspaper out for 3 years. So the alignment has to continue working, and it's going to take examples like Lamar and Alief and others to show others how to do it. All right, I'm going to tell you we should rely less on standardized assessment. I'm going to tell you we should utilize content mastery versus age, and this is a thing we're working on in Alief right now. It has to do with not so much trying to go away from that time and performance. So just because I've been in this classroom for 9 months doesn't mean I automatically get to go to second grade, or doesn't automatically mean I get retained if I don't meet some performance standard. Well, we're looking at it at a couple of our elementary schools is we're not going to have grades. We're going to have content mastery. And when you master certain content, you're going to be able to move on. Now, we're not going, and we got some kids who could probably go into middle school right now, which is not a good idea. But we're preparing for that. But what we're doing is we're asking our teachers to fundamentally shift this time and performance, these two variables, to fundamentally shift away from that. And let's just look at what the kid knows and what they're capable of. And let's keep challenging them. Because typically, most of the time, the little first grader who jumps out there and that little first grader who struggles, by the time they're 8, 9, 10 years old, the one who was struggling has either caught up, this one has slowed down, and then you got your rare instances where the kid keeps progressing. But I just see way too often, I walk into an elementary class and there's just kids who are bored out of their mind. Out of their mind. I walk into a high school English class and I see kids back in the back of the classroom, heads on the desk, and as soon as they get to go down to auto tech, they become the most brilliant kids in the school. We're addressing that. And my goal in Alief is to become kind of a prototype as we work through these programs. I've got more businesses and I've got more companies working right now with our school district, guaranteeing kids jobs if they work through these certain programs, excuse me, and they fulfill their obligations. And I have seen a fundamental shift in kids' attitude towards school. The video where you were talking to the kids, I talked to a lot of them. I got one of the best quotes ever. This is free. I'm not going to charge you for this one. So I'm talking to a bunch of third graders, and these third graders we're talking about money and how much do you think I should pay teachers? And some kid says you should give them $1,000 because $1,000 is a lot of money to those kids. And then I had one of them say, well, maybe you could divide it up and let them all kind of, every week one teacher would say, well, I did this for this and they worked harder and I didn't do this much. So every week, I know teachers don't want to hear that one. But anyway, I had one kid sit back there and he wouldn't ever talk, and finally he looked at me, his name was Michael, and he kind of looked up and he says, Mr. Chambers, this ain't rocket surgery. Think about it. Rocket surgery. This ain't brain surgery. This ain't rocket science. So he combined his sciences. He said, this ain't rocket surgery. Well, this ain't rocket, and he just kept on. He was dead serious. So he just kept on talking. And what he told me was pretty intuitive. He said, you don't have to pay the teachers that much. Just tell them to tell me, give me the stuff I want to do, and I will make the teacher won't have to work very hard. He says, I'll do all the work. And he said, and think about that, and that's kind of what we're trying to teach our teachers to be right now is don't be the center of attention in the classroom. Facilitate, lead, provide guidance, but let the kid own their learning. And that's what we're talking about. That's easier said than done. Totally understand. It's easier said than done. Pathways for all kids, as I mentioned earlier, 2-year, 4-year workforce and then armed forces. And one thing and I don't know in Region 5 how many there are of these, and I don't know what relationship you guys have, but early college high schools or P-Tech schools, we're opening our third early college, we opened it this fall, our third early college high school. And if you don't know what that is, it's a high school literally in conjunction with Houston Community College. And we have three. We have one for STEM, which is an engineering early college high school. We have a biosciences one for kids who are earning their degree in pharmacy tech. And then they have an automatic admission to U of H, and they go straight to work for CVS and Walgreens in the pharmacy. And then we're opening one with a program of international studies for kids who want to go into cyber security. Those programs are taking first generation college goers, and they are changing the trajectory of their life. Because now their parents are seeing their kids taking college courses and high school courses simultaneously. Every one of our schools have about 450 kids in them. And every graduating class is about 110, 115 kids. And every year, about 80 to 90% of those kids earn their associate's degree before they ever earn their high school diploma. It's phenomenal. And it doesn't cost them a dime. And the only reason that is because an A-Leaf HCC doesn't charge tuition and fees. That's not true across the state, and we're working on that. But my point is we have to get really creative, and we have to start meeting these kids where they are and meeting them where they want to be. Because they do want to be somewhere. There are things they will resonate with. Even the biggest knuckleheads on the campus, they know what they want and they know what they like. It's our job to figure that out and meet them there and not do what's convenient for us as adults. But early college high schools and dual credit courses, in my opinion, are critical after the early childhood and pre-K. But they're critical to this movement of getting our generations of kids exposed to higher ed at an earlier age. Many of you probably earned dual credit when you were in high school. That's big. Okay, a couple of observations. Expectations have never been higher. The need to support public ed has never been higher. We're being pulled. We are being pulled right now. K-12 is being pulled. You've got a part of the Republican Party. And yeah, I'm going to get political, but you got a part of the Republican Party that really does want to, I'm not going to go so far as to say they want to dismantle PUD. I don't believe they want to dismantle it. But they do want to separate and privatize it. And you know why they want to privatize it, right? That's where the money is. The guy that robbed the bank, the cop asked, why are you robbing banks? He says, because that's where the money is. That's where the money is. The state of Texas doesn't have a highway department that goes out and repairs and builds highways. They outsource it. The private sector lives and breathes in the construction industry off the state of Texas contracts with TxDOT. Same way with Health and Human Services. The state of Texas doesn't have a doctor's office, but it contracts with doctors all over the state for Medicaid, Medicare, etc. The only thing that is not privatized or outsourced in the state of Texas that takes money out of the Texas budget is public education. And it's, like I said, it's $55, $60 billion worth. It makes sense in a free enterprise system, in a capitalistic system, that people at some point are going to go, whoa, 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 there's a lot of money to be made. So there is a part of the Republican Party, and make no mistake about it, I know, I see it. They are there to somehow create situations that allow them to make money. If you ever want to know where a charter school is coming from, you go find the person who owns the land in which the charter school sits on. Find the developer. That will lead you to why that school sits there. That school doesn't sit there to educate kids. That school sits there because of the money that's being made off the property in which that land is owned. That's a little sidebar, but it's the truth. It's the truth. So this being pulled, so we're being pulled over here to do these things, and then we've got a segment of our population who wants us to scale back what we're teaching. They think we're getting too close to socialism, or we're getting ready, we're brainwashing kids into socialistic views, which is absolutely just, they've never been in a classroom. So my point is that try not to be one of those groups that's pulling in opposite directions, because it is wearing at the fabric of public ed right now. Here's the bottom line. K-12, we need to evolve. We need to change. But make no mistake about it, we cannot be replaced. And if you ever want to read a great article, and I'll send it to you guys, you can send it out. It was written about 2 months ago in the Atlantic. And it was, the gist of the article had to do with, why is America giving up on public schools when it's the only institution that has allowed us to succeed So education at its best is not an individual consumer. In other words, public education doesn't, this is going to sound counterintuitive. Public ed doesn't exist for the individual student and the consumer. Public education exists for the nation. It's to build the nation through the individual public consumer. And as soon as we start treating public ed as though every single person on planet in this country has their own individual right to whatever it is they have a right to under public ed, and we begin moving away from this idea that public ed is where we bring everybody and we push them through this 13 or 14 or in some cases 15-year experience, and they come out an American citizen. They come out. That's what I'm referring to when we talk about not being replaced. You can't replace it with homeschool. You can't replace that part of it. You can't replace it with a few hundred kids at this charter school and a few hundred kids at this private school. When you have 5.5 million kids in Texas and you want them to be educated so they get along and they do the three things I just talked about earlier, they have to come together and they have to do it in a public setting. When we're at our best, that's what we're doing. And oh, by the way, we're actually teaching them to read and write and add, subtract, and think and all that. So it cannot be replaced. Higher ed and the workforce must evolve, as I talked about it earlier. I'm very optimistic. The challenges, adults have to make decisions that support the main thing. We have too many adults in our profession that are not making good decisions. Way too many. Now, we have 99.9% who are making good decisions every day, but we also have those who are not. We have governing bodies that are not making good decisions. We have superintendents who are not making good decisions. We have teachers who are not making good decisions. We have principals. But we cannot sabotage our own profession. A lack of a clear vision. Texas, I would argue, and I argue with the powers that be all the time, there is not a clear vision for public ed in Texas. If you ask someone, what's the vision for public ed in Texas? Well, we'd like to be one of the top 10 states in the country in public education. What the hell does that mean? Yeah, okay, yeah. So how do we do that? There is no vision. There is no vision. So that leaves it up to us, right? And so every one of us in our capacity have to create that vision. Mobility. Let me talk about this real quickly and I'm going to sit down. Continuous enrollment. I would encourage every one of you to take a look, and if you want to know whether your school, your district is doing well, take a look at how the kids who are enrolled in your school or your district over a continuous period of time. Meaning, in my district, I'm going to give you an example. In Alief ISD, last year I shook the hands of almost 4,000 graduating seniors. Of the 4,000 kids who graduated from all my high schools, 23% of them had been in Alief since kindergarten or first grade. That means 7 out of the 10, almost 8 out of 10, had not been in our district the entire time. So that I began wondering, so how did the kids who had been with us this whole time, how did they do relative to college readiness, workforce readiness, et cetera? How did they do compared to the kids who had not? So we began pulling this data, and I would encourage every one of you that are in the business to do this. So we began pulling data for every kid who had been in Alief for the 12 or 13 years. 100% of them graduated on time in 4 years with their cohort. 100%. Of the 23%, 91% had scored at the college readiness level on the ACT, or TSIE. 91%. 63% were graduating with a credential or a certification in something. Now, granted, some of the certifications were CPR, which I'll talk, that's another story for another day. But there are a lot of them were in welding, plumbing, HVAC, electrical, the manual trades, auto tech. We have hundreds of kids graduating with NATAF certification and their ASC certification, going straight to work for dealerships making $40, $50 an hour. So my point is if the kids are exposed to the system and they stay in the system works. Mobility is our single number one demographic impact, is kids not being stable. If they stay in Alief from kindergarten to 3rd grade, we ran this data. We took 4 years. If you're in Alief for 4 straight years, from kindergarten to 3rd grade, the chances of you scoring at college readiness or at least a master's on the reading and the math STAR test in the 3rd grade is up almost 150% over the kids who have not been with us. It's phenomenal. It's staggering. So as an accountability system, I've told the commissioner, I said, hold me accountable. You can put an A, B, I don't care what you put on my school, if you hold me accountable for the kids who have been in my system and been exposed to what I'm doing. If you want to feel good about the district you work in, the campus you work in, or the profession, look at that data, because the kids that are with you are doing great. I don't mean doing fine, I mean they're doing great. The kids who struggle typically are the ones who are mobile, coming and going. And I can tell you horror stories. So what's the state? I think it's improving. I think it's improving. I think we're at a crossroads. Every generation can say that, but honest to God, I think we're at a major crossroads right now between what direction are we going to go as a state, privatization, etc. It's being controlled by money and narratives, and and politics. It's a political game. I would give us a grade, but I don't believe in letter grades on schools, so I'm not going to do that. And the last I would say is from Benjamin Barber. I don't know if you know who Benjamin Barber is. He recently passed away, but he's an economic and a political theorist. He says, America as a commercial society of individual consumers, we may survive the destruction of public schools. But America as a democratic republic cannot and will not survive. So we can survive as a republic. We can survive as a bunch of consumers. But as a country, we cannot survive. So the state of education, I think the state is good. I think we know who our enemy is in all facets. The relationship between higher ed and K-12 has never been more important. And the relationship between K-12 and the workforce, the meaningful workforce, has never been more important. And that's why I do what I do. I care about the kids I'm leading, even though they don't look like me. I care deeply about them because I've seen their families and I've seen their parents and I've seen what they're going through. And I look at these kids every day, and all they want is a chance. All they want is a chance. And so that's my story, and I'm sticking to it. So thank you for your attention. I appreciate it. I'll be glad to answer any questions.
Hi, I have a question. I've been hearing about the innovative schools, innovative school districts. What are your thoughts about that?
I got a lot. I'll narrow them down to a couple. If you're not familiar with the innovative schools, there's a piece of legislation that was passed a couple years ago that lets us, public schools, if we go through a certain process, we're able to waive a lot of the mandates the state puts on us. One of the things we used to gripe about to the state was, well, you let charters have all this flexibility, but you don't let us. Well, now we don't have that argument for the most part. We are now a district of innovation. So the process was we have a big committee, it's like 85 community members. They identify what's important to them. What innovative do you want to? What is it that's innovative that you would like as a community for us to do? We went through the process. It's worked beautifully in A-Leaf. We're getting ready to go to a year-round school. We're going to waive some of the school start mandates. I have been a part of a year-round school situation back in the 90s in Cy-Fair and watched an entire school board get booted because of it. So it's highly political. So I'm trying to take what I learned 25 years ago or 20 years ago. But my bottom line is I think it was long overdue. I caution people because I think there are some districts who are claiming to be districts of innovation through that process and doing absolutely nothing that's innovative. They're just doing the same old thing and calling it something else. So I would caution districts that are going to do it, if you're going to be innovative or you're going to call yourself innovative, make sure you're doing something that is innovative, that's different. One of the things we talk about in A-Leaf on this competition issue with charters is I've got to convince moms and dads why they should choose A-Leaf. As a school, as a principal, you need to be able to convince your community, this is what's different about, XYZ elementary or XYZ high school. Being an innovative district gives you the ability to do it if you choose to take advantage of it. Again, I like it. I think it can work, but I also think it can be abused if not paid attention to. Absolutely. Anything else? Yes, sir.
Thank you very much for your outstanding presentation. You argue that teachers, students, and community should be held accountable for the successful education of our students. How should we be defining student success? And what role should students and parents, as well as communities, be playing in defining student success, if any?
Okay, I'll give you our definition of success. It's when I'm going to give you two definitions. One is when a student walks across the stage and gets their diploma, but they also have something meaningful and useful that they're getting ready to go do, whether it's the workforce, or they don't have to take a developmental ed in college, or they're going into the military and they've already passed all their ASVAB, and that's a very concrete way I look at success. And we monitor that. We have numbers on that. I know what the percentages are. We also look at success on third grade reading, third grade literacy. Are students reading in third grade? Are they able to comprehend in third grade? That is such a huge cognitive, those of you that are in the cognitive area, that is such a huge portion of their life. Those are two concrete ways I look at success. If those two things are happening, then there's all kinds of successes happening that that we're not going to be able to pay attention to every single little issue. Does that make sense? Okay, those are two concrete. The role of the community, the role of the student. Again, in my district, we put as much responsibility on the kid as possible. We want them to own their learning. We want them to have some say in it. Yeah, we're the adults, and we're going to give guidance, but I want the kids to have an opinion. I've learned this: kids do have an opinion, and if you listen to them and you give them a chance, it's a pretty valid opinion. If you give them a chance. So I want the kid to own it. The parent's responsibility is to allow the child to go in the direction they want within reason within our school system. And the reason I say that, we have a lot of cultures in our district where the parents are so strong and they are going to dictate what the child does. That is a constant fight. And I don't exaggerate. It is a debate and an argument about whether a family values a kid going to some form of college. I can give you a couple stories, examples of kids they're accepted to an Ivy League school, and the family is fighting back because they don't want them to move that far away, etc. So it's a very fundamental answer to your question, but I just want the family to cooperate with us. You don't have to come up and do anything. Just don't sabotage what we're trying to do for your kids in many cases. Those are, without getting into a lot deeper answer, those are the things that I look at for success. Absolutely. Yes, ma'am.
I know you spoke of the budget shortfalls, but also the need for teaching positions and the shortages in that area. Is there going to be a budget to cover that? I mean, will we serve some that, they need certified librarians and they need certified reading specialists, but there's needs in those positions, but you just don't have a budget to.
No, that's a fair question.
Will those positions be filled? Because we were very excited about those numbers, but then we also think realistically.
Yeah, they're going to be filled. This is what's going to happen, and it has happened. I've been doing it. We have a metric, and it's a rubric that we look at if I have to cut $1 million in my $750 million budget, I can find $1 million usually, and nobody gets hurt, right? But we do use a rubric to determine if I make this cut, at what point does it impact the classroom? So I start with, we're going to fund every teaching unit, and we're going to work our way out. So districts are moving more to that. If you're, as I mentioned earlier, if you want to get into the market and you want to be marketable, get your ESL bilingual certification. I don't care if you don't speak Spanish, or get the certification so that you know how to work with those children and you work with those families. You will be able to pretty much write your own ticket where you want to go. But the money is going to have to come from people like me making decisions about what's in the best interest of our school, and making sure that if I need $1 million to hire these teachers, and I'm spending $1 million over here in something that I have no idea whether it's actually getting to the classroom or not, and no one wants to have those conversations because chances are I'm going to take something from him that he's been doing his whole career. And he's going to fight and argue that this is the impact I'm having on kids. And I come back and I say, well, this is what the evidence shows and this is what a rubric shows. No, it doesn't. It's going to take some courageous leadership, and you're not going to be very popular. I cut $30 million and I didn't cut a single teacher. I didn't cut professional development for teachers, but I cut some other stuff that, quite frankly, had some people upset. They left. They resigned. So you do what you got to do. But that's how it's going to have to be done. And just so y'all know, we're going to start the 2019 session with about a $7 billion shortfall. The state. $7 billion. That's before they ever write the first check. Harvey's expensive. Harvey's expensive. But anyway, that's how I wouldn't, unless you're going into a degree, a certification in driver's ed and health, you're going to be all right. You're going to be all right. Oh, I'm sorry. I know you said the last one. Okay, last one. Let me ask hers. Yeah, we'll let you go.
So I wanted to know, how did you feel about like certification programs like Texas Teachers? Like I'm 23, I'll be graduating actually next month.
Cool.
And I'm actually looking into possibly teaching 2 next year for the program. How do you do that? Do you class it beneficial? I guess how do you think about it close to school?
Right. Okay, so her question is, what's my opinion of going to college to become a teacher versus going through getting a degree but going through an ACP program, right? Whether it's Texas Teacher or whoever. I will tell you, and we've had this conversation, I think higher ed needs to get their act together in how they train teachers. I don't think there is a higher ed institution I shouldn't say in the country, but I think there is a woefully inadequate teacher prep program across most states. And that is not being, well, I guess it sounds critical, but I don't think the experiences we're giving teachers as they're preparing nearly meet the demand or the what they need. So the reason I'm saying that is because, to answer your question, I don't have a problem with someone coming out of an ACP program as long as they've demonstrated some of the strengths that we're looking for in a teacher. I don't 10 years ago would I have said that? Probably not. But right now I don't. Thank y'all.
Thanks, Steve.
Oh, President. All right, thank you.
We thank you so much for being with us on our first celebration of American Education Week, and I thank you all for being here, and have a pleasant evening.
Thank you.